Okay,
All right.
so now we're going to go here.
Got a really great show for you tonight.
Let's see. Do you see this, Bruce?
Oh, I see it now. Yep.
Okay,
Yep. Okay.
so we're going to go through a historical summary of some of the many paths that have been developed over time to find your way to some deep spirituality. And so the pictures we've got here, this is Elena Petrovna Blavatsky, who founded the Theosophy Society. This is Confucius. This is Lao Tzu up. Let's see. This is Lao Tzu up here. Here's the Buddha, Patanjali, and this is Muhammad. And then I quit putting pictures up. So that's it.
You don't have Jesus.
I don't, you'll see them. They're going to be here. Okay, so we touched on this earlier that many people seem to think there was a spirituality in times past that was an integral part of daily life that balanced spirituality against materialism. So there's a yin and a yang of the two. And right now, we're clearly way out into materialism and away from spirituality. So this.
And I think that's true for our approach to science and reducing that to technology too.
Yeah, there has to be a much more
That's a kind of
spiritual, or you have to include consciousness, is what many people argue that science is missing. And
Oh yeah, big time.
they don't have any way to do it. So this way, in the past, this way was based on love for yourself. And as you learn to love yourself, then you would learn to love your neighbor as yourself. And love was an integral part of your daily life. This was a part of the collective unconscious, this notion of love and joy that was throughout the entire universe. There's a little bit of this in every single entity, and all the entities are linked to one another. So the way that we're talking about here is a sharing of love, compassion, joy, honesty, integrity, male/female. There's a spectrum where some people are very male, some people are, and some people are in between the two. That's who they are. And there's a constant change or evolution of all of these things playing off against one another over time. So that's where at the end of this, we hope everyone would pick a path to find their way to spirituality for them. And that's what we're going to look at in the survey of all these different paths. So we start at the beginning with the shaman. And here, these native shaman and these tribes everywhere were spiritual practitioners. And some of them apparently went through meditation and started to link up with spirits in another realm through some altered state of consciousness. Maybe they did it through deep meditation. Maybe they took something like a mushroom, whatever it was. But these native shaman were able to connect and then to heal people or guide the deceased. And they were able to protect their communities by going into the spiritual realm. And you find these everywhere, and wherever you go into any village, the Australian Aborigines have shaman, 50,000 years. So there's a connection to the spirit world, they're seen as intermediaries between the human and the spirit worlds, and they're capable of traveling to these other realms to communicate with the spirits and influence things. And they are often healers, using these spiritual powers to diagnose and treat illnesses, both physical and spiritual. And this allows them to protect their communities from harm many times. And they communicate through these altered states of consciousness. Now, the shamans can guide the souls of the deceased in the afterlife to ensure their safe passage and well-being. But this by itself implicitly assumes that there's a reincarnation, that these souls go off someplace and then they'll come back and reincarnate in another body, in another life. There's an influence on nature that the shamans were able to influence things like the weather or game since they're hunters, they could attract game to come to them, and so forth. And then there's a knowledge of mythology that shamans had possession of extensive knowledge of histories and sacred places where these spirits were, and they use this to guide their communities and provide spiritual meaning. So there's typically a sacred space for each of these tribes that the spirits, the elders, have staked out.
And they knew the rhythms of things like eclipses, cycles,
Right.
and the precession of the equinox and all of that. They were the ones who had that knowledge.
Right, right. So there were a lot of ceremonies and rituals that they created, which in part led to connecting with spirits or healing the sick and so forth. A lot of this led to chants, to music, to dancing, and so forth, but it got everybody energized and involved in it, so that it meant something more to them. And depending upon the specific culture, the shamans could be prophets and come back and say, oh, here's what it looks like is going to happen. But deep down, this is not a religion. Shamanism is a spiritual practice, and it's not monolithic, but it has a diverse set of traditions and beliefs for each one of these tribes or groups that you'd run into. So the shaman oftentimes went through trances to travel to these other realms. They did a lot of times some sort of animal sacrifice. They were very knowledgeable in plants and things for healing people or for diet, but also psychoactive properties like mushrooms and other things to induce an altered state of consciousness or to heal people, whatever it is. There's a sweat lodge that is used for purification and spiritual connection. And then, as we said, there's chanting, drumming, and dancing that can induce, by themselves, they can induce a trance and connect with the spirits. So here's kind of the basic, this is the keeper of a way for a particular tribe, a native shaman. Now, stepping up from that, we're going to go to Egypt, and Egypt had a god named Ra, and Ra pushed the law of one. Now, it turns out what's crazy about this is this law of one that was in Egypt, this guy in the 1980s, Don Elkins, channeled with Ra, and he wrote up a whole bunch of books that you can get about this. So according to this guy, see, we don't have any, we can't go, we go back to Egypt, everybody's dead that talked with Ra then. So this guy is current. He did this in the 1980s. And he said that Ra told him that they're at a high level, higher level than humans are. That's what the sixth density is. Supposedly humans are at third density. So they're at sixth density. 6 is higher than 3. And they apparently showed up on Venus about 2.6 billion years ago, if you can believe that. But these are all humble messengers of the law of one, and they tried to spread the message in Egypt, and it worked to some extent, but not everywhere. So what did the Egyptians believe in, according to Ra? Everything in the universe is in reality the same thing. Any perceived differences and contrapositions in life's aspects are basically due to an insufficient level of awareness. So if you step up high enough and look at everything, you'll realize that that everything's connected and that all these differences really wash out. So all is one, and all beings are interconnected as part of this infinite creator. And then we have this notion of density of consciousness, that existence is structured into densities akin to grades in a school, and entities evolve spiritually through learning and experience to go, hopefully, to move up. And I think the Egyptians had like 28 levels of these things. So we've got a long way to go. The law of one suggests that everything in the universe connects on a higher spiritual level. Every action reacts, whether positive or negative. And so you should be conscious of your actions, especially how they affect others. And you should accept differences between people and their cultures, because everything is connected. Everything is one. That is what the law of one says. So that's what the Egyptians started from. Now, around 500 BC, we have Confucius in China, and it's interesting. Today, if you go to China, you'll find there's hundreds of millions of Buddhists, hundreds of millions of people that study Confucius, and hundreds of millions that study Lao Tzu. And they'll go through the day and they'll spend a little time on each of these three. They're not hung up on just being Confucianism or whatever. They're doing a little bit of each of them. So who is Confucius? He considered himself to be a transmitter of values from the earlier periods. And he said these were the great times, and all these earlier periods, the great things that had been done there, the morals and the teachings have all been abandoned when you get down to 500 BC. So he was arguing continually in his Analects, his main work, that you should return to the values of these earlier periods. He advocated for piety. He endorsed strong family loyalty and veneration of the ancestors, especially, and respect of elders by their children and of husbands by their wives. So very male chauvinistic. But he recommended a robust family unit as the cornerstone for an ideal government. And he championed the silver rule, which is the negative form of the golden rule. And that is what it says is, do not do unto others what you do not want done to yourself. That's the silver rule. So what's interesting is, for 1,000 years, from basically 900 AD to 1900, 1,000 years, the Empire of China was ruled by people who were selected on the basis of how they did on a series of tests. And the tests were based on answering questions out of the Analects of Confucius. And you might ask yourself, why in the world, do you think that's a good quality if you score high on a test for reading the Analects? But it worked for 1,000 years. What can you say? And these were the best and the brightest were the ones that got closest to the emperor. And the others were in the outer provinces and so forth, but they were all very smart people. And so it goes. So Confucianism stresses the importance of cultivating a good moral character, having a positive impact through the concept of cosmic harmony. So there are the certain key virtues that Confucius cited: benevolence, Ren, which stands for benevolence, humanity, and kindness; Yi, which is righteousness and acting justly; Li, which is proper conduct, adequate, and rituals; Ji, which is wisdom and knowledge; and Jin, which is trustworthiness and sincerity. So these are key virtues. There's many other virtues, but these are things that were prized in the past, and he felt had been lost, and wanted people to pick up on them. He wanted to, he stressed the importance of proper relationships within society, to respect and have loyalty and fulfill one's role in society. He referred to the duty of children to respect and care for their parents, as well as the obligation of the parents to raise and educate their children properly. He stressed the importance of education for personal growth and for the improvement of society. The more educated ones went into government service, and he emphasized this silver rule or golden rule, whatever you want to say: what you do not wish for yourself, do not do unto others, emphasizing respect for all people. So this is still there today. Hundreds of millions of Chinese are actively involved in living this way in their daily lives. Confucius believed that the rulers should lead by example, demonstrating virtue and acting with justice and compassion. Confucius emphasized the importance of the social order, that there was the emperor, and then the people below the emperor, and the people below them, and everyone needed to understand and fulfill their roles in society. And finally, Confucius believed individuals should strive for self-improvement and cultivate their moral character. So that's what we have for Confucius, for his view of finding the way. Now we come to competition. Lao Tzu, or Lao Tzu, it actually appears to be a composite figure. There are a number of people that lived in roughly the same time as Confucius lived, and they wrote up a lot of teachings together. And their way here was that wisdom is attained through understanding the way the universe works. But in order to understand how the universe works, you must live in harmony with the universe. Easier said than done. So you should accept the forces at play and act spontaneously and intuitively in accordance with these forces. So this is a little more nuanced. When you follow the way of Lao Tzu, you start to wonder, am I following the way? His teaching of the way, or the Tao, is called the non-action, or Wu Wei. So it is about one must do to become virtuous. Rather than resisting or attempting change, one should instead accept and allow the change to take place. Well, that's interesting. I don't know. A lot of times you can see change, and it turns out to be just a passing trend. Doesn't mean anything, but whatever it is. So he had a set of precepts, this group that became Lao Tzu. Do not kill, but always be mindful of the host of living beings. Do not be lascivious or think depraved thoughts. Do not steal or receive unrighteous wealth. Do not cheat or misrepresent good and evil. Do not get intoxicated, but always think of pure conduct. Maintain harmony with your ancestors and family. Never disregard your kin. When I see someone do a good deed, I will support them with joy and delight. When I see someone unfortunate, I will support him with dignity to recover good fortune. When someone comes to do me harm, I will not harbor thoughts of revenge. And as long as all beings have not attained the Tao, I will not expect to do so myself. So only when everyone has actually gone the way, the Tao, will you then be able to achieve this. So this is somewhat more mystical. Then we come to Patanjali, who wrote down the Yoga Sutras as a roadmap for self-realization and liberation through the practice of yoga. But he really emphasized ethical conduct, self-discipline. A lot of the physical postures and breath control led you to be able to achieve deep meditation, leading to a state of unity and peace. And the thing about this was, again, it's probably oral for thousands of years before he wrote it down around 0 in the Common Era. So who knows where this came from? For example, the Buddha was undoubtedly aware of the Yoga Sutras. The foundation of this is 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, and this encompasses ethics, or yama, relation to others, relations to oneself, posture or asana, freedom of breath or pranayama, freedom of the senses, focus, contemplation, and integration. And the last 3 make up meditative practices. So really, the Yoga Sutras is, to achieve this self-realization and liberation, you have to be able to understand how to deeply meditate and to realize, as he makes clear, that reality is not what you think it is. There are 8 elements of this practice of Ashtanga Yoga, which culminate in samadhi. So they're called limbs, the yama or abstinences, niyama or observances, asana, the yoga postures, pranayama, the breath control, pratyahara, the withdrawal of the senses, dharana, the concentration of the mind, dhyana or meditation, then finally samadhi or absorption or stillness. So when you achieve samadhi, you're in very deep meditation and your mind is stilled. You're in this isolation, and the discernment of Purusha or pure consciousness, the self, as distinct from Prakriti or nature, the cognitive apparatus and all the instincts that come with that. So this is another way to find your way on. Now, what Ron Cowan came up with was actually in deep meditation, he realized that what we see in 3 dimensions is just a part of what is really going on. And in fact, there are 24 spatial dimensions and 2 time dimensions. And we have a 26-dimensional space. The thing is, they have these compactified dimensions. Here's a picture up here of a compactified Calabi-Yau manifold. But you have to remember, this is just a snapshot. This thing has got holes in it, and it's turning and morphing and rotating around every which way. It's not at all static. And so we have one subspace of 10 dimensions for matter, one subspace of 10 dimensions for dark matter, and finally 6 of compactified dimensions that really contain energy beings that link together these 2 different subspaces. So here we live, here we have our guardian angel, our other spirits that are right next to us, and so forth. So this is also a way to, in deep meditation, to step back and look at this and in all of its glory and watch it change and evolve over time. We have Hinduism. So here we have the adherence to the concept of Dharma, which is a cosmic order involving rituals and righteous living that was expounded in these Vedas that the Hindus kept. And so the major Hindu scriptures, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Puranas, the Mahabharata, which includes the Bhagavad Gita as a piece of it, the Ramayana and the Agamas. So these are, huge books. The Mahabharata itself is 10 times as long as the Iliad and Odyssey put together. And that's only one of these. So you can see what's going on. But the beliefs that come about are karma, that you have action, intent, and consequences, and samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth, that you have a soul and it reincarnates with a body, goes through life, dies, and then after a while is reborn. That's also in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and it's not really obvious to me it's in Confucius or Lao Tzu either. There are these 4 purusarthas, the proper goals that you should pursue. Dharma, which involves ethics and duties. Artha, which means working for posterity through hard work. Kama, where you may contain your desires and passions. And moksha, which is liberation or freedom from passions, and ultimately achieving samsara. And so it goes. So that's the Hindus. That's their path. So now we come to the Buddha. And the Buddha, 500 or so BC, instructed his followers to take a path of development leading to awakening and full liberation from dukkha, the suffering or disease, dukkha. So this path is a middle way between the extremes of asceticism or sensual indulgence. And teaching dukkha arises alongside attachment or clinging, the Buddha advised, meditation practices and ethical precepts, all rooted in non-harming. So again, very deep meditation is how you would achieve the way. There were the 4 noble truths, the noble eightfold path, the doctrines of dependent origination, karma, and the 3 marks of existence, and other things like this. Bruce, what is your thinking on, for example, this type of Buddhism, the 4 noble truths and the eightfold way?
Well, basically, the way I read it is that the Buddha went into a deep state of insight and realization, where he saw these things with his own mind. And he basically realized that everyone is capable of having that kind of realization. Now, it depends on doing a lot of meditation, but it also depends on previous lives. If you've been noble and ethical and so on in previous lives, these things will unfold naturally. But basically, he's talking about there's a level of realization in everyone's mind where you can have this level of insight and realization naturally. The biggest thing is the main problem that causes confusion and anger and all the negative emotions things is difficult karma. And difficult karma is very difficult to transcend. But basically, he said that all of it is transcendable, where you come to full realization deepest reality. This is sort of what Ron was talking about.
Hmm.
That is the path that he basically said what he found everyone can find, and the path to realization is various meditation and so on.
Right. Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
I had a teacher who had that, and basically had that level of insight where he could understand everyone else's mind and know exactly what the conditioning was and what caused it and everything like that. And
it's a gift.
Yeah, well, it's more than a gift. It's like in Buddhism, there are a number of leaders that do have that realization, but a lot of them are just simply born with it because they've been working on it for so many lifetimes.
Hmm.
But the main insight is that realization of freedom is available to all beings.
Right.
Basically, they talk about in terms of the main problem is that most people think that while they have a self based on previous karma and so on, that they think is real. But in actual fact, it doesn't exist. It's just an appearance. And that is basically what you transcend. You basically transcend that where you come to what they call the natural mind, which is what you already have had all along. And natural mind has, by its own nature, has vast compassion and wisdom that's naturally already reality. And the Buddhist way is simply to return to that level of reality by simply purifying through meditation practice difficult karmic formations.
Right. Got it.
Yeah.
So just to summarize, these Four Noble Truths, the dukkha, which is the suffering. This is what the Buddha said, I bring you suffering.
No, the law is that there is suffering.
There is suffering, yes.
You have to acknowledge that there is suffering.
Right. If you don't acknowledge there's suffering, you get nowhere.
Well, that's kind of like the first level of insight.
Right.
Like it's obvious that there is suffering, but you only, if you have, in a sense, the discipline of mind, or just the natural realization mind that sees it already as the way it is.
Right.
So there is suffering is the first noble truth.
So once you realize there's suffering, then you ask what's causing it.
That's right.
What in the world is going on there, samudaya?
Yeah.
And as you dig into that, then you're asking, how in the world can I end this? How in the world?
Right.
I'm attached to this transient world, and can I somehow contain or let go of all of this? Which in fact then leads down to the way, which the Buddha called the Noble Eightfold Path, which was his path for leading to being able to attain this, to have the release from dukkha. And I think I put on the next one, the Eightfold Path here just contains these 8 practices. And if you work on these and end up with samadhi, this meditative absorption or union, then you can in fact achieve what the Buddha was talking about. You have walked, you found your way on the path, on the way.
Right.
And for each person, I believe this is different. But you know, in general, it follows this. But some people are better at it than others.
Yeah, it's also very well documented. All the stages of unfoldment and realization are very highly documented, and there's
Right.
thousands of people who have done it.
Right.
So it's you know, like there's
Yeah,
yeah.
plus you have these people that are living in caves that don't eat anything for years. They don't go to the bathroom for years because they're not eating anything, and they don't seem to sleep. You know, well, okay, that's what they can do. I can't do that. So anyway, now we come to Marjorie's thing, the Kabbalah, which is the very mystic side of Judaism. What's amazing to me is that how few anecdotally we have a lot of people in the area that are Jewish, and we bring this up and they say, "Oh, I don't know anything about this Kabbalah." You know, it's they practice all of the different activities. There's 600 activities you have to do in the Torah to practice Judaism, to be a kosher conservative Jew. But this mysticism isn't there. They just don't cover it. So it makes me wonder. So you wanna take this?
Okay, well, this is what Bart's put together.
Margie did not put this together.
Um, I looked it over, and it's, you know, in a general way, I think it's, you know, accurate enough. So here we have Kabbalah is a form of Jewish mysticism, which explores the nature of God, the universe, and humanity's place within them, emphasizing the idea that the world was created broken. That's not quite true. And that humans have a role in repairing it through spiritual growth and action. In a way that's
You want to say anything about
that's
the
true.
tree of life or?
They talk about reality arranged in this configuration of the tree of life that relates to human beings as a microcosm and the universe as the macrocosm, and everything in between can be understood on this diagram. It's not meant to be literal. And it's really explaining like a kind of physics that everything is emanating from this singular point
At the top.
at the top of unity. But when you have everything as one, it might as well be nothing, because it's impossible to experience it. There's nothing to experience, and there's no experiencer to experience it. So without that veil or illusion of separation, you might as well have just a void, which is what they say it ultimately is. But in order to have creation, we need the illusion of that separation, and there's more about that later. So it's a spiritual wisdom system and practice that's over 4,000 years old. It means to receive. Kabbalists teach that every human being was created to receive complete joy and fulfillment. Kabbalah teaches the individual and the world as a whole how we can improve our lives. We believe at the core of the world's great religions and spiritual traditions are truths that we call the wisdom of Kabbalah. Wisdom to be experienced, not just studied, and is what makes every person's experience unique. In New York, I saw a lot of Hasidic Jews who really practice it every day. they have this amazing presence of joy. They're just
Yeah, that's true.
emanate this incredible joy. One of the main principles is that there are no coincidences. I believe a lot in synchronicity. Everything has meaning, including ourselves. How do we find our purpose? How can we live a life of purpose and meaning? How do we live joyously? How can we all positively impact others and thereby the world? And this is a nice concept. Tikkun Olam is about repairing the world. The central concept is that the world was, it's not that it was created in a state of imperfection, but once it was created, the imperfection showed. And that the teaching is that these 10 Sephirot were just, there's actually 11 there, that's an 11th one, appeared with no connections between them. These are the paths. And when the energy came down from the above into these vessels, into these spheres, because there were no connections, they shattered. And it said that those the shards from the shattering created the world that we know. And our job is to reconnect the shattered emanations through what's called the path of return. And that's part of the repair, is that we ascend from the bottom up. So the divine, if we're going to have a separation, is emanating from above, reaching down to us, and needs us. And we need the unity of the divine. But in order to be truly whole, the wholeness can't just be in that oneness. It's like a fetus in the amniotic fluid. It doesn't know that it's not the same as the mother. When the fetus emerges as an infant and becomes an individual, it's, yes, everything is connected, but it's going to have its own life journey apart from the mother when it individuates. And so that's the distinction. And so it's kind of meaningless to just talk about the oneness. There's nothing to say. It just is. And the Buddha talks about the 10,000 things. Yes, and that can be a huge distraction, but it's also where our experience is. And so the teaching of Kabbalah is that the realization of unity after the separation, after the individuation, after the birth of the individual into an individual monad that is then returning. That's a different path. That's up the ladder. So we're returning to the divine unity. Has a different realization because of the separation, which we know is an illusion. But without that separation, there's no experience. There's nothing happening. There's no learning. There's no realization. So their thinking is that the divine needed that illusion of individuation and separation in order to achieve an integrated wholeness. That's the repair. So the divine needs the particularization of our consciousness in order to realize its own unity on a higher level that's not just this amniotic unity of the infant in the womb that doesn't know the mother has a headache, that the mother has her own memories and her own experiences, her own desires and karma and experience, and her own future apart from the life of the child. So the tree of life on the one hand can represent an individual. It can represent from head to foot, the head and the shoulders, these are the arms, down through the torso to the feet. But it's also larger than that. So, and then they refer to, so to try to limit God into a fixed thing is a form of idolatry that's really frowned upon. They talk about the unknowable nature of the infinite, of the I like this term Ein Sof, it means without end. That's actually beyond the tree. The tree is far too particularized to represent the true transcendent divine. It's a description of the systems of the immanent divine.
So just to go back to what Ron did, here we had these 24 spatial dimensions, but we said 18 of them are compactified. They're shown here down at the bottom. And there's 3 holes in this one, 4 holes in this one, and 8 holes here. So the 6 dimensions here with the 3 holes connect to the 3 of the 8 holes here. 4 of the 8 holes connect here, and the final 6 dimensions have 1 hole connecting to another dimension. So the 10 dimensions that are here, that are everywhere in space, is what apparently these mystics saw as the tree of life. And it's everywhere, and it encompasses, as you can see, for example, here's a picture showing simply planets or chakras that are inside each of us, and all of that takes place in those compactified dimensions.
It is what they were talking about, absolutely.
Yeah. So the fact that they even saw that is mind-boggling. Here we go. The universe was created through this contraction or Tzimtzum that allowed for the existence of space and matter because there wasn't anything. So there was this contraction of nothingness to create what we now call the universe. And probably there are many other universes out there. We're just one of many universes.
Well, it created this vacated space out of the amniotic oneness.
Right.
So that there could be it's an artificial concept, but it's important because that's where you can create.
Right.
It's in order to have a playground to play in. And without that contraction of the infinite, there couldn't be anything at all, because it was already filled with the everything.
Right.
Which is the same as nothing. So in order to have that play, it's an illusion. And that's why traditional Jews light 2 candles on the Sabbath eve, which I don't think they even know. But that's why they don't create. They don't celebrate the Sabbath with 1 candle. It's because they're celebrating the duality, which is an illusion, but it's an essential delusion.
Right.
Without that delusion or illusion, there's no love.
Right.
One of the things that I'd like to bring up is that with both Buddhism and Ron's view of the universe, there's no God.
Right.
Right. No, there's
No.
no.
God did
Well-
not create the universe. There is no
Right.
God. And that's what the Buddha himself found, is that there was no God.
Well, Kabbalah says the same thing. They're not talking about a God creating something like a puppet master sitting at a table. They're talking about that God is the creative process. It's the creator and the creation. To talk about it as a personification is idolatry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they still talk about it as unknowable.
Right.
But in Buddhism, it's knowable.
It's the oneness. That's all they
Right.
mean by God, is the one. It's unknowable by our finite consciousness
We
Until
have
our
to get
conscious-
raised to a higher level to.
until our consciousness begins to expand to that level, then we can have some hope of perceiving it. But it's infinite. It's not certainly not a person, but it's also not a
It's
thing.
not an old man in a robe with a bunch of angels sitting around with harps. That's for sure.
Yeah, as my teacher used to say, there's no Santa Claus on the other side of the moon.
Right. Right. No.
But
So
here, it's not a form or a gender.
the thing that I always find disturbing about this Kabbalah is I look at what Israel's doing day in, day out in the news, going at it in the Middle East, and I just can't believe that they really follow, the precepts of Judaism. This is the essence of Judaism right here, and yet they're out there bombing everybody in sight. So
Well, one of the problems with the Western religions is that there's no understanding of karma. Like karma is a resultant from unwholesome volition.
Right.
But having a history of difficult karma is sort of like a prison sentence, but it's measured in lifetimes. It takes you
right,
thousands of lifetimes to transcend the original difficulty, which is actually, in terms of Buddhism, is reality that can be done. But the momentum of karma is like, for instance, I mean, they want to kill all the people in Gaza. They don't realize that that's karma. Like
right.
they have no concept that they're creating own difficult karma for themselves for thousands of lifetimes, simply because
Yeah.
it's one of the big differences between Buddhism and the Western religions.
Yeah. Thank you, Marjorie. Oh, wait, here's one more.
Wow.
Okay, here it says, it's not just a set of doctrines, but a way of life, emphasizing the importance of personal experience and spiritual growth. The soul and its structure. That's one thing that the Tree of Life can be said to be illustrating. Explores the structure of the soul with different levels and aspects, and how it interacts with the physical world and also the spiritual world. It's very similar to diagrams. I have some visuals of this. Showing the chakras. It's very similar to those energy centers. Not exactly the same, but it's a very similar concept. And everything does happen for a reason, encouraging individuals to seek meaning and purpose in their lives. It was actually after September 11th that I realized I could not be a Kabbalist, because I didn't really know what they were doing with their energy over there in the Middle East. And so it's something that I'm still fond of. I love it, but I realize I had to step away from it. I kind of have a more uh interfaith or interdisciplinary approach now, and it's still part of what I love. I love the awareness of it, but I feel like the Sufis, who were very close at one point, they used to get together and exchange teachings, have made more of a really conscious commitment to peace and nonviolence, that they're really embodying the oneness in a way that I really appreciate. And I think it's at the base of Kabbalah, but there's so much sense of separation with it, and that it's a Jewish practice and not really for anybody else. That I feel like there's a pretty significant error there.
And then we have this no coincidences.
Yeah, they look at synchronicity a lot. And that it's meaningful to look at it, to look at your life in terms of it.
Right. Super. Thank you. Thank you.
And Jesus was a Kabbalist,
He was,
absolutely.
yeah, he
without
was
question.
an Essene, and the Essenes were Kabbalists. They were a particular sect of Judaism that decided to basically go out into the wilderness. They found some watering holes and they set up schools and villages. And so that's where Yeshua learned, as his cousin John was with him also. He was also an Essene. And his teachings, those of Jesus, centered on love, compassion, and Mary Magdalene, who was his other, who's been marginalized by the Roman Catholic Church for the reason that she's a woman and they'd rather have men on top. But she went to Egypt and was very schooled in the Egyptian Isis school, very spiritual, to complement what Jesus was doing. And so Jesus emphasized loving God and your neighbor as yourself. And so the hard thing is to love yourself. And then it becomes easier to love others. But he spent a lot of time preaching also about the arrival of God's kingdom. And this ends up getting picked up because he said, well, the temple is going to be destroyed just within your lifetime. And the temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD when the Jews had instigated a revolt against the Romans, and they slaughtered every man and sold all the women and kids into slavery. And that was the end of the city of Jerusalem. So he was talking about this, and people couldn't believe that it was that close at hand till they all got slaughtered. But he says that you're aspiring to a realm of justice, peace, righteousness, and love, everyone loving one another, even your enemies. And so you have to have the possibility of forgiveness and redemption through faith, and even offering hope to those who just felt it was hopeless that they could come through. So his way should have been what Judaism would have become, but instead they chose to crucify him, which created this other path, which we call Christianity today.
But he was not a Christian.
He was not a Christian. He was a Jew, an Essene, a Kabbalist. So Mary Magdalene taught that there's no inherent sin, but the sin arises from acting according to corrupting habits and natures. It's up to you what you do. And she encouraged people to find hope and strength within themselves, which is hard, and to seek the wisdom within. But her teachings, in particular the context of a relationship with Jesus, highlight the importance of equality and the value of all people. So they in fact were married. They had several children, and so it goes. All of this has been suppressed, of course. The key points here: forgiveness and redemption. The key thing here is to forgive those who harm you, who are your enemy. The humility and service. You want to by serving others, demonstrate that this is the real greatness of serving rather than being served. The spiritual transformation, to seek a deeper relationship through meditation, or you call it prayer, which leads to your spiritual growth. Then there's an inner transformation that Mary Magdalene stressed, which leads to an inner transformation and spiritual clarity. This is, I think, much more getting toward the notion of enlightenment, this inner transformation. And then finding the Son of Man within. Each of us has this collective unconsciousness, this entity within each of us, and seeking him is the journey of self-discovery. And then finally, Mary Magdalene talks about the conscious awareness and the universal witness that unites the soul and the spirit. So again, very a different way to approach to find the way. There's no notion, for example, of cathedrals or raising armies to go slaughter people like in the Crusades. None of that is here. All of that's been created by others.
More like Buddhism.
The Buddha, we'll come back to that. The next one we've got here is Muhammad, who heard, he was in a cave and he heard or sensed or channeled a variety of messages that became the Quran, and these became that there is but one God, Allah, and it's important to submit to the will of Allah and practice compassion, justice, and good deeds. And they're the 5 pillars of Islam, which is you have to profess your faith that there is but one God, and that is Allah. You have to pray, and they pick 3 times a day. You have to be charitable. You have to fast at certain times. And then once in your life, you have to do a pilgrimage to Mecca to see what goes on. So this is Muhammad. The key thing here is it's still a monotheistic belief that there's one entity that's central, but Muhammad believed he was the final prophet after Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. And as we'll see, that's probably not true. And the Quran is the literal word of God that was revealed to him. And then there is an afterlife, and there is reincarnation that takes place, and there is some type of reward and punishment for what happens in this life. Ron was really down on Muhammad. He said, yeah, he's there, but he said, when I compare him to Jesus, there's no comparison. So but we come to the mystic side of Islam, which is Sufism, and these were there right from the get-go, and they really stressed the spiritual union with the divine, and they emphasized love and devotion, unconditional love for God, leading to a deeper connection with the divine, the spiritual growth and self-discovery, and union with God through various practices that they had, and then the purification of the self from worldly attachments to better perceive God's presence. So that's why we have this picture here of these whirling dervishes, which are Sufis, they're dancing and singing, and they're becoming enraptured. They're being caught up. It's a different way to meditate, to be caught up in this crowd and really go at it. And the unity and oneness that comes through this and the interconnection of all beings promotes tolerance and understanding between people everywhere. The Sufis seek knowledge of God and the universe through intellectual understanding and direct spiritual experience. And many Sufi orders emphasize the role of a spiritual guide, helping individuals progress on a spiritual journey. And so there's a lot of practices. There's the music, the chanting, the meditation, and the dancing, and the remembrance of God, of course. The perfect man, this concept refers to the state of spiritual perfection where the individual's true self is revealed and they're fully aligned with God's will. That's what you're striving for. Many people do not make it, but the Sufis strive for this state of fana, where the ego and the sense of self are dissolved, allowing them to experience union with God. And there's a divine presence, that God's presence is everywhere, and they seek to perceive and experience this presence in all aspects of life, and the importance of the heart. The heart is the seat of spiritual understanding and connects with God. And so they strive to purify and cultivate their heart. So this is a philosophy that believes in one God, sees everyone and everything as a part of him. God is one, the Sufi saints preached, and everything is in God and nothing is beyond him. And one can find God by sacrificing all, but loving devotion to God. So this is the mystic side of Islam. And again, this doesn't get carried on. I put in here Hildegard von Bingen and Veriditas. She lived around 1150, 1180 AD. That was when she did a lot of her writing. And her real contribution has been this work called Veriditas. So she's encapsulating the divine force of nature, which she perceived through channeling these. She had these visions that she just started to write down what in the world she was getting in these visions, and the depth and breadth of them is reflected in different translations of this book. And the words within the word have all kinds of meaning, and so the translation tries to capture some of this, but what she really sensed was this essence of the divine force of God itself. So the word itself, Veritas, comes about from two Latin words, green and truth. Verity is green and veritas is truth. So she created this word veriditas, but it doesn't really translate too well. But that's what she was going through her head. But it was meant to reflect nature's divine healing power and the momentary condition in which God heals through the greening power of a living plant. She was a great healer, and she had all kinds of knowledge of plants, the plants that grew at the abbey she ran, and healed people with them. And this all leads into this veriditas. So even as you eat every day, you're being in union with the greening power, and you're being reminded of your internal interconnectedness with nature. Very amazing person.
I understood it to be kind of like photosynthesis, what she was talking about, which if you think about photosynthesis, it's miraculous,
Yeah.
that things are transmuted through
You
this,
you take in carbon dioxide and put
Right.
out oxygen.
right?
That's amazing. How could you do that?
And you take something toxic and make something, essentially nourishing and essential to our survival from the toxicity. But for one thing they've learned about her is that she had apparently, she suffered from seizures, from epilepsy.
Yeah, she had seizures or fits from an early age. She was like 10. She had these. That's why her parents put her in a nunnery, was because they didn't know what to do with her.
But she was also very, transcendent but highly functional. She ran like 3 different abbeys
Right.
that were like factories. They had, farms, and they processed food and took care of animals, and
And she had all this music that these
Right.
women were chanting, and all of the monasteries are filled with men that were doing chants. So of course the Pope sent over somebody to check this out, like what's going on here? Having women chanting.
and apparently she was creating the first operas
Right.
that were ever created, and choreographing these things, these manuscripts and arrangements of music that we listen to it every morning. We really love it. We have.
Yeah, got the greatest body of medieval music by far. There's more and more people recording these things on YouTube. I mean, someone's listening to this stuff.
Yeah.
There's lots and lots of tens of recordings
And
there
they're
on
coming
YouTube.
from places like Russia
Yeah.
and Sweden, they're not just Western Europe. And they're just wonderful. But I think her concept of viriditas it's really about quickening of the soul. And it's this almost psychedelic sense of liveliness that spiritual energy has. And when somebody is blessed with it, is embodying it, they can pass it on. It's like a contact. It's contagious. And so there's kind of a picture of her having a vision with these flames, and she had these excruciating headaches that started to get better when she started to record her visions. But she had incredible visions and created these amazing mandalas. She would direct them. This is gold leaf. This gold here, to be painted by people in the monastery. They executed them for her. She wasn't really a painter, but she would write poetry and lyrics, and they would put on performances with the music and the words. And it was all this kind of enlivenment, this quickening. The woman that I learned about Labyrinth from named her Labyrinth organization, which is a nonprofit in San Francisco. She named her organization Viriditas. And she sees walking the labyrinth as a way for all of us to have that kind of quickening experience.
And another thing to keep in mind, though, is just this union with nature, that when Jesus was there with Mary Magdalene, they would simply go off into a grove of trees and gather people around them and meditate and pray, and there would be some preaching by Jesus and Mary, but there wasn't any. It was the union with nature, having a nice grove of trees around you was what made it all happen. There's no need for a church or a cathedral or anything else. You want to be in nature, be plugged into nature. So the next thing I put in was just there was a different group two different groups there in Europe, the Cathars that actually were apparently started up by Mary Magdalene in the south of France, and they grew to be formidable, and the Pope and the King of France decided to take them out in the First Crusade in 1250 or so. But they believed in God. They believed in they rejected the Catholic Church's teachings, but they just advocated a life of asceticism and nonviolence and love, and they felt that there was a good God and an evil God. That was how they were able to manage good and evil. That God had both aspects of these things, and they were happy. They were prosperous, and that by itself, prosperous and happy, was what the Pope and the King of France hated, and so they got annihilated to the last person. At the same time, you had the Knights Templar, who started up in 1118. Supposedly, I think this is just a cover story, to safeguard pilgrims that were traveling to and from the Holy Land. But they gradually grew into this incredible force that was based on vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Were incredible soldiers, and ended up in prayer and serving God. And they, in fact, spread throughout all of Western Europe and even over into the Americas. So the third voyage of Columbus, as they were coming back, they stopped on an island, and there was a Knight Templar there with the natives, teaching the natives about spirituality and other things. Columbus couldn't believe it. And so it goes. And of course, the Templars are still around, but they're undercover right now, and we'll see what happens with them. Since we're doing this for Unitarianism, I put in, what in the world was Unitarianism? And you have to go back in time, and there was a period in the middle 1500s when there was a huge debate over, is there really a Trinity, as the Catholic Church said, of a Father, a Son, and a Holy Spirit? That's what Jesus said several times in his preachings. Or are they really one? Is there a unity there? And Unitarianism, as part of the Reformation, as part of all of these different Christian faiths that were breaking off from Catholicism, Unitarianism argued that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit were united. There really was a unity of all of this. And the person who came up with this sort of idea was captured by John Calvin in Zurich in 1580, 1600 or so, and burned at the stake, along with all of his notes on why there's a unity of God, which shows you, it's only 500 years ago that this was going on, and people took it so seriously that it was important to actually burn someone at the stake for believing this. Okay.
Well, there's proof positive, right?
So there's Unitarianism, and now we go much more modern. We go to Joseph Smith, who was here in the United States, and he formed this movement. He channeled and received all kinds of messages, which became the Book of Mormon, and he created this movement of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, and intended to restore the true gospel of Jesus through this Book of Mormon. But he had a special set of priests, and the true gospel of Jesus includes ordinances and priesthood authority, and this had all been lost at the time of the apostles, and Joseph Smith was the one who was ordained to restore all these ideas. And the Book of Mormon is a record of ancient inhabitants in the Americas, showing evidence of the divinity of Jesus and the gospel. And you can get the Book of Mormon if you, there's no problem getting hold of it. And if you mention to a Mormon that you want it, I'm sure they'll show up at your front door and offer to give you one and try and convert you to be a Mormon. So that's a modern day faith. The nature of God was that God the Father and Jesus are separate personified beings, and that the Holy Ghost is totally spiritual, that the importance of the priests having authority was restored, and it was important to have baptism and temple rites for various things. The degrees of glory that individuals who repent and are worthy will receive greater blessings than those who are wicked, with the greatest blessings being eternal life in the celestial kingdom, and others would enter terrestrial or telestial kingdoms, whatever those are.
What is celestial?
I don't know. I saw that. I didn't check it out. Smith thought that the family is the most important unit in life. Eternal marriage is essential for exaltation. And he taught that the gospel can be preached to those who died, and they'll be redeemed. But he didn't go so far as to believing in reincarnation. He drew the line there. Then at the same time, it's crazy, literally 1830, there was a surge in the United States in spirituality, and this led to a movement called Universalism. Now, Universalism actually became a faith that was actually the largest faith in the United States in 1850. In just 20 years, it took over everything. And it's the belief that all people will be saved and reconciled with God. That's what makes it universal, regardless of your actions or beliefs during your lifetime. So a loving God would not condemn anyone to eternal punishment. But a belief in one fundamental truth is that the living truth is seen as far more reaching than the national, cultural, religious boundaries of that one truth. And this attracted so many people. Then the Civil War came in the United States, and so many people died that this push towards spirituality died out. And after the Civil War, there was a start of a surge toward materialism as people were building railroads and putting in telegraphs everywhere, and then telephones, and on and on. So the Universalists merged in 1960 with the Unitarians, and that's why we have Unitarian Universalism. It's funny that in 1960, the Universalists, even though they were small in numbers, they had a lot more money than the Unitarians in the United States. The Unitarians had a lot more membership, but were poor. And so this was a win-win for both sides. Then we had Theosophy, which we touched on a couple times, that there's an ancient and secretive brotherhood of spiritual adepts, the masters, who are found around the world, but primarily centered in Tibet. And they've cultivated great wisdom, supernatural powers, and the Theosophists believe these masters are attempting to revive knowledge of an ancient religion once found around the world that will once again come to eclipse all the existing religions in the world. So it holds a position: there's one God, a single divine, absolute, articulate, with a cosmology. So the universe is perceived as an outward reflection of this absolute entity. And the purpose of human life is spiritual emancipation, and the human soul undergoes reincarnation upon bodily death through karma. The universal brotherhood and social improvement are guiding principles, and there's no particular ethical framework. So that's Theosophy. It's a spiritual activity. Many would say it's not really a religion, But as you can see, they say there is no religion higher than truth. That's their motto on their logo. Then, just to be complete, I put in, this is another way to find your way. If you ever saw Star Trek, they had these medicine beds. You lay in the medicine bed, and it cured you. If you had a broken leg, it healed the leg in, hours. If you had cancer, it was all gone. And so there's a lot of interest on the fringes of medicine right now in looking at trying to do something like this, simply because there's an energy field to your body, and apparently this sort of medicine brings your body back into resonance with what is its good state, and in so doing, that's what kills off all the bad stuff that you have and leads to you healing. So it's a different way to find your way, is through some type of medicine like this. And then we touched on Jung, who had this notion of a collective unconscious, a shared, inherited unconscious mind. Jung, being a psychiatrist, constructed this model here. So you have consciousness and then unconscious, and most of it is in the unconscious, with complexes. The collective unconsciousness has a piece here. There's different archetypes down here. And then you have an ego in your consciousness and so forth. So this model may suggest a way to think about how to achieve the path, how to get union with this collective unconsciousness that's here. And then finally, what Ron saw, Ron Cowan, back in 2018, is that there's information everywhere that's just coating the walls of the compartments of space. And this information contains both algorithms and data, but it's constantly scanning its surroundings. And when change is detected, this information has algorithms that control the change. So this is a distributed collective unconsciousness. So everything is interconnected, and there's a collective unconsciousness, or if you will, mathematics, not physics, rules everything, is different ways to interpret what's going on here. And then we close with something that we do every day. This is from Hawaii, Ho'oponopono, to make right, set things right. So this is an ancient Hawaiian practice of reconciliation and forgiveness, aiming to heal and transform relationships. And it's very simple. And it does involve remorse. It asks for forgiveness, gratitude, and it consists of four phrases. I'm sorry, please forgive me, I thank you, I love you. And if you repeat those again and again, you can go into a trance and meditate. And if you focus on something, some problem, some person that's having some troubles, this might be a way to reach them, to express your love for them and to get them to come around to fixing their own problem, because ultimately they have to fix it themselves. You want to say anything about this? Okay. So with that, our little survey is done. And guess what? Next week, Marjorie's already got this thing teed up.
Well, I hope I'm ready.
This is Answer to Job. This is the book of Job in the Bible, in the Old Testament. And Jung in 1951 was just caught up with this idea of, I've got to answer this book. So he wrote this, Answer to Job. So that's what we're going to be covering, good and evil. And with that, we're done. That's for next week. Comments?
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Have a good, Bruce. We'll see you next.
Okay, yeah,
Have a good weekend.
okay, you too.